to show you today what I do with botanical paintings when I cannot take my subject matter for some reason or other into my studio to paint with at my desk. When I'm dealing with something that has to remain outdoors, either because it is planted in the ground in my own garden or it is in some public garden where I cannot pick or take anything home from there. So what this involves is taking a lot of painted notes on color and lighting and structure of the plant, really looking at it from all angles and understanding how the petals and leaves and growth structure happens within the particular plant that you are tackling. In this case, it is an Iris Douglasiana, which is a California native, and I have been wanting to paint this for quite some time now. I bought the plant about a year ago, and I've been waiting since then for it to come into flowering season. And now, look, here it is. So, I'm going to be painting some irises. And the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to match colors here, because I'm not going to dig this plant out of the ground, and I'm not going to be sitting here in front of it painting the whole time. A lot of this I'm going to be doing at my desk. And so I want to have all the colors accurately reflected in a log that I can then refer to as I'm painting, rather than having to run in and out constantly. And I can also use photos then at that point, although I will also be referring back to the actual plant as I go. But I'm not sure how long these flowers will last. I mean, you see this one over here was one of the first flowering ones, and it's already starting to fade a little bit. So I need to take advantage of stuff when I can. So first thing I'm going to try to color match are the petals themselves. And I have here my color charts, and I can actually hold these up and look to see which colors are the most accurate. And it looks to me like Imperial Purple and Rose of Ultramarine are some pretty close matches. So I'm going to do a little bit of testing with those to see if they are indeed close enough match as I hope. And actually, I think it's actually a little bit of cobalt blue mixed in with that Imperial Purple as well. So I'm going to mix that. You can see my mixture here on the palette, and try that out as a little color swatch. Then I could hold it up to my plant, and it looks like that was too much cobalt blue, so more Imperial Purple. And that looks like a good match for some of the darker veins and the back areas of some of the petals. The fresher, newer area over here is more of a magenta look, and I think that Rose of Ultramarine would be a good match for that. Let me try that out. Rose of Ultramarine. Maybe mix it with a little touch of that Imperial Purple, just to bring down the rosy magenta tones and give it a slightly cooler cast. And that is indeed a good match as well. So while I have these colors in my memory, I'm going to write them down because I might forget later what I used. So the first one was Imperial Purple with just a tiny bit of cobalt blue. And the second one was Rose of Ultramarine. And you see here also what I've got is a little sketch, very rough sketches of some of the major components of the plant. So the flower, a petal, the structure of the growth pattern, how the leaves form along the stem, because it's sort of this zigzaggy pattern that happens as the plant matures and grows. and I want to be able to make sure I have that correct in my final painting. And also the other thing of note is that the base of the plant has this woven basket-like appearance. So those are the major components of the structure here that I'm dealing with. And now what I'm going to do is actually test out some of these color combinations that I have set. So that rose, a little bit more of it. Rose of ultramarine plus imperial purple combo. I'm doing a very diluted version of it because I'm probably going to have that as my initial base coat wash along a lot of my petals. At least a lot of the newer, fresher ones. As they get older, it seems like the purple is deepening in tones. And so I'm doing that here on my rough part just to see. And it's not a very detailed or very careful painting right now. I'm mostly trying to capture the colors that I see. Oh, and the other color that I'm going to need to do is this yellow that goes down the center of each petal. And that's pretty simple. It looks like a straightforward match with my gamboge yellow. That would be this color. And it's pretty simple. There's no mixture involved for that. It is almost exactly that tone of color. So that would be gamboge. The other thing I'm writing down in my notes here is where I'm using these colors. So in the first one is the older petals, younger petals for the second, and the gamboge is for the central little yellow streak. And then I'm going to reflect that in my little mini illustrations here. And the veins along the leaves are, the petals are also done with this darker imperial purple and cobalt blue mix. Now all of this, as I said, is simply to remind myself what colors and things I'm using. It's not to get an exact, beautiful painting yet. We'll work on that later at leisure. So this tells me very nearly all the information that I need for the flowers. Now the next part I'm going to look at is under the flowers here. On the underside of the petals, it's actually this yellowish tone. Which fades down into the green of the stem. And I didn't actually notice that when I first did my little sketches here. So I'm going to do that now. And it looks to me like it is a very light wash of gamboge. Which is then shaded down into the greens with some green gold. Green gold is the stem. And again, I will make a little box here for that. I have a diluted gamboge, and I'm going to have a little bit of the green gold on there as well so that I can see that. So that's the underside of the petals. Next up will be the leaves. And it looks to me, let's see, I'm going to start with a base light wash of serpentine. As sort of my underlayer coat. And I'm mixing that with a little bit of lemon yellow. Serpentine and lemon yellow. And then over that, I'm actually going to do a secondary little swatch over here for that. And I gotta let that dry before I can show what other colors. And so I'm looking at these leaves and trying to decide what color mixtures I would use to achieve those darker tones. And let's see. I don't actually have my botanical color palette right out here right now. This is actually my fantasy color palette, so it's not as good for mixing the greens, but I do have enough of a selection, and I think I'm going to use, let's see, I need something to bring down the intensity and also to give it some of a bluish tint. So I'm going to mix green gold with French ultramarine, oh, and that's promising. We have a little ant over here. Come on, ant, go elsewhere. You don't want to get into paint. Not good for you. All right, so that is the initial mixture I have, which is pretty close to what I want, actually. What did I say? It was green gold and ultramarine blue. I think I like that mix. That's what it looks like on paper. I need a little bit more green to it, so I'm going to add some more. Oh, so let's see, green appetite. I can't remember what I used. You see, this is why I need to write it down. All right, I am now officially using green appetite and French ultramarine. Okay, yeah, that was the mixture I used. And that's a good dark green. Green appetite and French ultramarine. And the earlier color combination was serpentine and lemon yellow for the underlayer. All right, and now my little test swatch here is dry enough, and I can see what effect it has then when I'm going to paint over it. And this is indeed what color I am exactly after. All right. Now the final component here is a shading color, and it will be a tone that I'm going to take as a very light glaze over everything else. And one of my favorite ones for that would just be neutral tint, which is, as it sounds like, a neutral gray color. And I'm going to water it down so it is very diluted. It's just a little bit, just a hint of gray there. And what I do is I use that glazed over stuff. Well, it would work if this was dry. It was not yet dry, but that is what I'm going to be using for shading later. That one was neutral tint. And a final little element is that down deep into the leaves, there's almost this reddish tone as they grow out from the root. So, and it kind of edges the top edges of the leaves. And so I'm going to determine that color, which I think is a pretty, let's see, it's a Windsor red. Looks like this red over here, mixed with something to just bring down the intensity of it. So I'm going to use Piemonte red. This has more of a brownish tone. And then this is the mixture that I get. With that being the result on paper. And that is found along the top edges of the leaves like this. This is now my roadmap that I can use to create my iris painting. I have all the information that I need here, with maybe a few additions of some shading colors, but I'll get to that when I need it, I think. For now, this is going to be adequate for getting started and to begin the painting. Here we are in the studio now. What I'm going to do, I have the sketch done. This is my final pencil sketch of the depiction that I am going to be painting of these irises. And the first thing I'm going to do, because this is a botanical style painting, the background area is going to be left white. And because I am a messy, messy person, I cannot be trusted to maintain a white page. Therefore, I'm going to create a mask with some tracing paper. So this is just a sheet of regular tracing paper, and I'm putting it on top of my piece. And now I'm just going to draw with a wide margin around the area that I am going to cut out with a pair of scissors in just a second. My tracing paper sheet is not big enough, so I'm going to need to tape a second piece up on top for there. But let's do this bottom half first. Mask has been cut out. You see, I wasn't going to make you listen to 10 minutes of me cutting out crinkly tracing paper. All right, so I have two pieces, and I am going to take some masking tape. I use Artist's acid-free masking tape for most of this kind of stuff, as well as for when I am framing. And I am going to tape the corners as well so that my mask is firmly attached to my painting paper board, as the case may be in this. Oh, and there we go. I did it crooked. Make sure everything is straight and attach it. Now, the reason I do this, I mentioned very briefly, was that I cannot be entrusted to keep things nice and neat What I mean by that, to elaborate, is that frequently when I am painting, I will have my paint off to the side over here, and I will have my water and my brush, and I will dip my brush in, and I'll be happily painting along, and I'll be doing something on this side, and as I move my brush all the way to this side, I will go dribble, dribble, drip, and drip paint all over the place. Usually in places that I don't want it. Or even if I put it on my right side, the same thing occurs. Sometimes you'll drip as you go across, which is why I frequently paint. People will see me doing this, putting my paint and water directly on top of my painting, but trust me, this is actually a way of keeping spills and things off of the actual painting rather than being a danger. I have this tray. It's actually it's a lid from a Melissa and Doug cheap little paint set that I had for my daughter when she was about 3 years old because the paint was junk. She was happy with it. She used it all up, and I noticed that this lid was perfect size, and I like that it's transparent because then I could see what's going on underneath on my painting. And I can also make sure the bottom is clean so I don't get stuff on it. But it has, most importantly, it has a lip, so that in case I do spill my water, it will be contained. And my water jar is fairly small, so spill of this is usually contained within the area of my tray. Now, the purpose of having this little tray and being able to position it directly near wherever I'm working, for example, if I'm working right here, I can move my tray right next to it. And that's going to minimize my chance of drips and mishaps. So that's a short little explanation about that stuff. And now I am going to get started with painting this. It's probably going to take about 20 hours of work to do. Proceeding on to the painting process now. This next section is going to be done in time-lapse, and it is at about 4 times the speed. So I believe this section is going to be about 20 minutes. And that means that it took me about 80 minutes to paint the first flower as well as one of the buds. I'm going to show you this first in time-lapse in this video, and in the follow-up video that comes after this one, I will also do it in real time for the secondary blossom that is over down to the left. And that way you can see exactly what is being done, and I'll talk through all the layering and the types of techniques that I use. But first of all, here, this is going to be the quick version so that you can get more of an overall sense of what goes on as I do a botanical painting. Initially, what I start off doing is a lot of very light, pale washes. This is done with the pigment very dilute, almost so that you can't see much of anything. It's just the faintest hint of color, and this just sets a base tone for the subject. I do this pretty much for every element as I continue painting. And when I was setting up my chart, indeed I was writing down those initial base washes that I was going to use. These are essentially the main color and tone of the plant, flower, leaf, petal, whatever it is that I'm attacking in that moment. And then what I do after that is I follow up with a lot of fine detail, mostly done dry brush with glazes of color in between. Glaze washes that I layer on top. So anyway, I'm going to let you watch this, and I'll be back at the end for a few quick words, and stay tuned for the next video to see how all this is done in actual time. Thank you for joining me today in seeing this little segment of how to do botanical illustrations. If you're interested in having me address any technique questions or focus on requests for what you'd like to see in upcoming videos, please check out www.patreon.com/StephanieLaw. I want to thank all my subscriber members that I have at Patreon and here on YouTube. And it's because of the subscription support of the amazing people at Patreon that allow for the continued production of these time-lapse tutorial videos that I do. Again, that's www.patreon.com/StephanieLaw. Thanks, and I hope you enjoyed today's installment.